Hello and welcome to the weekly live stream. Tonight we'll be continuing kind of where we left off last week with a little bit of extra progress. I did work on it a little bit last weekend and got more of the land characteristics done. So we'll look into that. Yep. So let me thank my patrons first off. We have a new patron tonight, Leon. Thank you for joining, and Richard Tingle is also a recent patron. Thanks, guys. It means a lot to me because, like I said, I mentioned last week, we have a lot of medical expenses lately, and so keeping the servers running is harder. And even this small amount really helps. So thank you. All right, without further ado, let's get started. You can see up here, I've got the secret link for anybody who wants to download the engine or join the Discord. All that's there, and then you get the password and everything. So super secret link that's not so secret. Okay, so what we're viewing here, let me make sure I'm not blowing into the microphone tonight. All right, so what we're viewing here is sort of the land characteristics that I have gathered and propagated. If we zoom in, it's just kind of putting indicators on the map. Things that are blue or wet or near wet, it kind of propagates it outwards. Things that are red are, what does red mean? Let's look at the code. So we kind of have this right here. So pink means it's good for quarrying, which means like these things, basically you've got cliffs, so it would be easier to quarry stone, so there's more likely that buildings and stuff nearby would be built out of stone, or that would be a primary building material. Yellow is minerals, which right now is the same as stone. Eventually that'll be different because there'll be fractals to sort of decide where rich mineral deposits are and where they aren't. Fishing is red. Okay, fishing and farming, red and pink. Water is cyan, and seaports are white. So along here, we've got, this fishing is nearby, or farmland. Fishing is nearby. These areas where it's pink are potentially good farmland, which is a combination of, growability, flatness, and then it builds a score from that. So, these is pretty flat, so it gets a score. And so if you pull back, you can kind of see how and green is how well things grow there, which is really sort of an indication of trees and forests. And then along the coast here we have possible locations for seacoast towns, ports, because they've got nearby is fairly deep water. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking tonight, which is great for a live stream. So this is how it's been boiling down. I noticed I spent some time last weekend after doing this. I had pretty much had this done on Saturday, but I noticed some of my river systems had gotten simpler. This used to be a big, massive river system that flowed all the way up into here, but when I changed the terrain algorithms, it ended up randomizing in such a way that it decided to chop the rivers off here and form these overlapping lakes. Although the engine doesn't yet know they're overlapping, so it doesn't know to combine them. And then it's got this new river that starts in here and starts kind of high. It actually looks pretty cool in game that that these overlap, and that there's like a river starting in the middle of the air. But I started on Sunday looking at finding these cases so that we can merge them back together, and finding these cases. I'm okay with a lake being here. I think that's kind of neat. But to mark these river systems as back together, so that down here at the coast we know that this would be a really wide river and not a thinner one like it is now. So basically, there has to be another pass to detect these cases of overlap. Rejoin this river to kind of this lake, and start it off as pretty wide, and then what happens is it'll come down here, and that means that this this lake down here, which is a little pond right now, would have to be big, and that would rejoin with this one, and so on. So we, by nature of those not having having only removed a little bit of the lake and there's a whole river system, they would rejoin and kind of reform. And the hope is that it wouldn't cause all these rivers to join back together, because that was one of the original reasons we did that. But as right now on this map, there's really only one major river system, and that's kind of lame as well. That's this one. I think it goes all the way up in here, and even still, it's cut off in some cases. Like I know that kind of these statistics make it hard. Let's turn these off for a second. Just turn this off for a second. Yeah, so you can see we had a river system up here that got disconnected from this and created a lake, but that lake is big enough that it would have overlapped and flowed back into that one. And so I need to verify, but I'm kind of sick and tired of rivers. I figure you guys are sick and tired of rivers, so I didn't want to work on that tonight. So we're going to continue on with the town propagation stuff. But here's a better look at those two lakes I was talking about. See, we've got a really nice big set of rivers here that feed into these two now lakes, because these linkages were broken. And so in this case, it would re-heal them and then eventually heal that one too. And we get back. So anyway, back to what we're doing. So I had it set up so we just saw the massive amount of land characteristics, and the approach I'm using now is kind of one I started when I prototyped this before, which is, while factoring in randomness, we're going to initially pretend like we're simulating how the land might have been settled originally. And that's why we'll start with finding out where it was likely that coastline cities would form, and then from there figure out where other inland towns might have formed, and so on, leaving plenty of wilderness if we can. And so then however many towns form in here would make these cities bigger each time that happens. If several towns form upriver, then this city at the river mouth would become really big, and so on. So let's get rid of all of this not noise, it's useful information, but let's get rid of all this and just concentrate on the towns. So if I put this back, double check. So this is to build up. Yes, this builds up a score for each possible town site. And I believe right now it's filtered on, only seaports. So when this finally completes, so this filters it by only seaports, and each one of them is scaled based on how high its overall score was, based on what resources it had available, and so on. And so that's what we're left with. And what's next is, I think we'll sort them, or we'll turn them into like some kind of candidate object, sort them, and then start with the best, randomly decide whether that's a real town or not, and then suppress the ones around it. Hey Jeremy, how's it going? And let's show where all of the towns would have formed. Let me turn this off for a second. These are the score for towns everywhere, not just at the coastline. We'll see in a second. And so after we find good coastland towns, then we propagate that probability onto these others, because if there's a coastal town within a certain range, there wouldn't be another town formed necessarily, but it's basically suppressing the probabilities. Things with a really high score or really lucky dice roll might still form, because you might end up with clusters of towns that maybe logistically don't make sense, but in real life that happens. Oh yeah, we want to cut out the want to go back to, let's see if it's underwater and if the, see, I think it's body distance. That means we're actually in the water. Let's see if that's what it is. It's not just body distance though. It's yeah, it's water area is what I want. I want towns to still form right on rivers, but not so. If water area, or let's just see if the, yeah, I think water area. Water area is greater than 0. Yeah. So this should filter out towns that would be in the big water. Because I was seeing a lot of those, yeah. We were seeing a lot of those dotted around here. And we want to, I think we're already eliminating cases where we don't consider seaports on islands that are too small. They're not seaports. So everything here has a reasonable landmass, I think. Although this doesn't look like it. Let's make sure our land area is, else if so, land area is less than, what did I decide? There's a sort of minimum land size, and I encoded this somewhere. DDD. Trying to find. Let's look for land area. Small land threshold. Yeah, so we don't consider, we're not supposed to consider it seaports. Let's see what the small land threshold is. Area is 8. So maybe it is already doing this. So let's check. We'll do a screenshot. Yeah, because there would have been seaports on some of these smaller ones. So these must have more than 8 samples. So that's fair. I also filtered out seaports that were ridiculously high. It's hard to tell here because these are next to the water, so they're not as high as they look. But like there used to be cases where higher cliffs than this and there would still be seaports. And while I think that would look cool to have a 200-meter cliff with a seaport on it, it's probably not realistic that any traveler would have ever settled a seaport there. Alright, so we've got like all the towns, all the potential town sites scored, and we want to turn that, let's turn it back on. Well, first, what we'll do is we'll just define a class to be like our possible site. What do I want to call it? Well, we'll just call it a settlement. Oops. So that will have a location. Steal some of the, let's just make it have a cell. So a settlement. And we want to sort these by probability. Well, let's track them all first. So Alright, let's, so we have an overall score, and we'll set sort of a minimum score. Min settlement threshold. This would be a double. So let's say, well, you know, maybe I don't want actually a minimum, but I'm just trying to keep the, let's see, if score is greater than, nope, and settlements threshold, then we'll draw the thing. So, you know what, maybe we'll keep track of ports separately. So, well, first let's see what this does. So we'll take a snapshot of this and make this change where we're checking against the threshold. Oops. Alright. Settlement list. Port list. Yeah. They're at row. No such proper min settlement. Min settlement. Oops. Wrong button. Min settlement threshold. Oh. There we go. It's always good to make typos in the live stream. Okay, so yeah, that cut out way too many. So either my scoring algorithm is way too harsh, because we would never form a settlement other than near a river, and that's not necessarily true. Yeah, so let's check a look. So the river multiplier is 4. Essentially, these work out to be how important everything is, relatively speaking. And I tried to make rivers more important, but I may have made them too important. And before I go screwing up my old numbers, which I spent hours finding, plus now we have the old ones as a reference, let's set everything equal again so that we see what a natural score would look like for everybody. Okay, that's better. We're seeing towns appear in the middle of nowhere. I like this, but again, this is why I started messing with it in the first place, because it made forest towns way too likely. And in fact, being near wood and being in the middle of the woods is two different things entirely. And so we might need to track that separately. So let's because certain land will be inhospitable, similar to how temperature is makes land inhospitable. So maybe we need to track and it's not that you couldn't carve a town out of it's not that you couldn't carve a town out of a woods, it's just that if you're in the middle of deep forest, you may not necessarily want to be building a town there for humans. So we'll make that multiplier 1, and Where did, okay, so this is different. We're going to use so we want to subtract in this case. Bonuses. Penalties. So I never really got into penalties, so this is a minus equals. So we want to, what is it called? Bio vegetation. Vegetation level. And let's make a deep forest threshold. Sorry guys. Deep forest threshold 75. Greater than 0.75. Greater than 0.75 is pretty much guaranteed to be thick wood. And this is the score that already factors in moisture and other things. So so what is we get? Cell.bio if cell.bio what do I call it? Nope. Vegetation level is greater than or equal to yeah, so we'll just subtract this with the overgrown multiplier. So let's see what that does to our wooded areas. Hopefully it'll eliminate some of the, yeah, okay, so in the deep forest we would be less likely to, and we can lower that or raise that as we needed. We could make being near wood less of a thing as well. But what's going to happen is that as we go, when we decide that a town gets plotted in a certain area, we're going to decrease the probabilities in a radius around that and increase the probabilities in some slightly larger circle, but then otherwise leave everything else alone. So eventually all of the priorities near towns near cities will raise, and so relatively speaking we could set a higher threshold. So I think this is a reasonable start until we start seeing you know, what kind of badness this makes. So let's basically, I'm just trying not to overwhelm my algorithm with too many. Let's set the threshold again to something super small, and we'll see. Yeah, so we're good. See what renders. Yeah, so this is with 0.01. Anything in here has a 0.01% chance, or basically a 1% chance of generating a town. You know, just on the route as with nothing else going on. Where's my? So this river system is not as long as I remember. No, it's this one up here. This is the big one. So, you know, maybe that's a reasonable threshold to start with. We'll see. Let's see, did it put any in the desert? That'd be the key check. Yeah, no, the only town, well, yeah, it left some out here in the middle of the desert. So already we know the threshold is not great. So let's put it back at 0.1, see what that does. Because realistically, the climate would be too bad. Well, see, that's not good either. So let's put it 0.5. And maybe actually give it at 0.1. If a no town forms there, no town forms there. It's just gotta decide on some reasonable thresholds, and it just seems unrealistic. But probably what we could do is, well, we know we're interested in this area, so let's see what the scores would have looked like for the different properties. So it's because it's farmland. That can't be true. So this is a sign of a bug. I have to check and see. So we're checking flat. If the temperature is within normal range and the precipitation is greater than, or if there's some water. So that's something I'm going to have to debug. This should not have been farmland, I think, because it's the other algorithms are coloring this yellow, which means it's desert, and that should not be farmland. So I don't know why, because this 0.923 I think works out to be 40 degrees Celsius, which is quite warm. And then it would have to have some precipitation, which these should also not have. Alright, well, I'll deal with that problem later. At any rate, but that's why that part of the desert, maybe this is more green than I think it is, and it's just dry grassland. So I'm not going to spend too long trying to debug that. But that's why we get possible town sites out there in the middle of the desert. Or what looks like the desert here. Alright. And I'm not against having desert towns if other things force them there, but alright. So let's see. Let's collect these settlements. Let's keep track of the score. Whoops. And maybe we want to keep track of all of these things. Yeah, sure, because we might want to come back and change the multipliers. So excuse me while I do a little cut and paste coding. Alright, so first of all, down here, if we met the minimum threshold, then we'll add, we're going to create a settlement. Settlement, I can't spell. And cell. I think we got cell here. Yeah, we definitely do. Wood equals wood. And see, we got wood. What did I say? And let's add in. There's another one I calculated. Overgrown. Cut and paste coding. Let's go. so we had a score, wood, stone, minerals, fish, farm, water, water, and then we'll have to recalculate that. Okay. And so for all settlements, settlement list, we'll add the settlement. And then if it's got ports, we'll add it to the ports. Let's just make sure I compiled and I didn't screw up the syntax or anything. Uh-oh, Pepsi's gone. Alright. I should get Pepsi to sponsor my live stream. Alright, so let's take out this rendering. And what we will instead do... Okay, so at the bottom of this loop, we'll have all of our candidates. Yeah, so we've got all of our candidates down here. And so now we could do some... Did I comment it out or did I delete it? I commented it out. Good. Okay, so now, like if we did this, we won't have any markers. Yeah, so like we got rid of all our markers, and what we'll do then is we'll go down here, set port list each port, and we can draw, where did we get V from? Okay, so this will, I could probably split this into two. Oh yeah. Let's probably split this into two files so that we don't have to constantly recalculate the scores. Port.score. Yeah, why don't we make settlements 2. Oh, you know, it only took 6 seconds to render. Yes, yeah, so now we've got our coastline ports back. Okay, we got like, it says we've got 3 or 4 viewers on. Everybody's quiet tonight. So, but let's see which the best one is. And so for that, we will create a priority queue. I believe Java will let us specify a comparator. Priority. Here it is. Yep. Yeah, hi Ron. I just got spoiled last time because we had such a good conversation going on. Yeah, so I can specify comparator. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's make def best ports new priority queue, and I think then we want P1, P2, and then we will make it just based on score. I think I can do the spaceship operator 1 or 2. I think it's 2. Spaceship. Now, this will tell us real quick, won't it? Yeah, okay, so maybe it's not. Dope. Did I miss a... Oh. Okay, so I got the syntax right. Now I need to add them in. So what we'll do... And we'll do best ports. Let's do the 10 best ports. Well, no, that's not how we would do it. This isn't a great way to do it because peak poll. We're not also checking to see if it's empty. Yeah. This is the boring part, right? Figuring out where the town goes. But the neat thing about this process is that what comes out of this is not only do I know the town site when I find one, I'll know why it exists. Like it's near farmland, so there'll be farms. It's near mineable place, so there'll be mines, and so that helps me construct the town beyond just figuring out how many people would live there and what kind of buildings it would I mean, I would know what kind of buildings it have, how many people could live there, is it a trade hub, etc. Yeah, so there's this, which is finding out the position of the towns, and then beyond that, calculating the routes between the town's roads and seaports, because then we can figure out which ones are trade hubs and stuff like that. Poll. So let's see, this should show us just the 10 best towns or possible port locations. They may be a little difficult to see. And I'm assuming it worked at all. So let's make these more obvious. First, thanks for... Yeah, it's always one more thing. This all started because I wanted to make dungeons. You know, that's... And I said, now I gotta have towns built first. Can't just plop a dungeon in the middle of nowhere. I need to know what other things are around. So let's make this 200 so that the towns look really obvious. I would be happier having split this. Okay, so we've got a couple up here. The first 10 says there would be a town here. Duck dungeons. So we've got that. A town would form there. Yeah, sure, probably. It's a very good location for a town according to this. There's a couple more up here. Yeah, I don't know. These are not great sites. But you know. Whatever. This is concerning. Let's see. Okay, it's not as steep as it looks. I'm still looking for bugs in the fractal. Let me make these more obvious because that's like not... Okay. Alright, so we got those. One over here. Gafen Dungeon. Oh, right. Haha. Yeah, right, because it's the only creature I have right now. I'll make some, you know, skeletons or other mobs or something for the dungeons. Okay, so we've got a town that would form probably there. I'm a little disappointed that none of these sites down here, especially this stuff, were in the top 10. top 10s all seem to be up there. And this is because in the scheme of things, you know, this is where the first towns are. That's why they formed up here, because, you know, the first 10 are going to be in, the tiles were done in this order, so these are the first tiles. Yeah, and realistically, the whole setup here would have been centered around the spawn point, and of course this is a way bigger area to calculate at once than would be normal. I think probably 3 by 3 is where I would start, and then as the player moved I would build out, but it could be up as much as, you know, 5 by 5. This is a little ridiculous because I wanted to include all this stuff, and I wanted to have good motivation to deal with performance now rather than push it off later. But the spawn point's way over here, so we're not even centered around the spawn point for this particular world. I just found this whole area to be a lot more boring for town generation, so I moved it for river generation specifically. So this is a little unrealistic because normally we would bias the towns that are close to the spawn point. So, you know, maybe we could make a fake spawn point, like over here somewhere. Alright, I'm kind of talking in that upward talking kind of way. The spawn point would normally be in the highest area. Let's maybe recalculate spawn. Let's do that. Let's say, where's the spawn function? We will calculate our own spawn. And this all is just getting it from the spawn, find spawn, which is just using the world utils. Alright, well, we could force our fake spawn to be fake spawn equals new vec3i, I think. I actually don't know. Let's look for world utils. Yeah, so the other thing is last Saturday we had just a small power blip and my computer turned off, so I swapped the UPS out with one I hope that won't flip itself off when the power flips. But it meant that I lost all the open files that I had, so I have to reopen them as I need them. It's kind of a pain. It was getting a little big though, so okay, so it does return back 3D. So everything else would return vector 3D. So let's find a fake spawn for ourselves. I think maybe the top of this. Let's see, which is higher? Is it this one? Let's see, elevation is 419 over here. That's pretty tall. Yeah, only 315 over here. So this will become our new improved spawn point. What is this? 419. Yeah, okay. So we'll pretend there was a spawn over here somewhere. Oh, 424, even better. Nice. Okay, so let's just move this over here so I can see it. 61695 424 minus 1 5518. Okay, and we will confirm that's in the right place by copying this code that draws the spawn point. Marker add fake spawn point. Fake spawn bojoink. Oh yeah, it's got to run the whole thing. Burr, burr, burr. Wah, 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 wah. Okay. Okay, so this doesn't really help us yet because that particular spawn isn't near the coastline, but the spawn is located, so I'll show you. There's an algorithm that so it starts in an area. So this spawn was found because it kind of starts at 0, 0. Let's see. Let's find 0, 0 for real quick. I'll show you. Okay, well, let's. Okay, so this corner right here is 0, 0. And what it does is within a radius around there, it will search for sort of the highest point that what's doing here is it starts at some I believe X start. Oh, we'll see. We're starting. Yeah, 0, 0, and has a radius of So what it does is this is not the right. Yes, it is. Okay. So what it does is it will start at a certain radius. 32,768, which is like 2 of these tiles. Each of these is 16,384. So where did we decide the 0, 0? So that right here. So basically it looks in this 4x4 grid here that we're missing a chunk over here. This 4x4 grid, it kind of searches every 256, according to this, every 256 meters within this 4-square grid to find the highest location so far. And for each highest location, it then casts radials around to make sure it's not just like a tiny island, that the island is of a certain size. Or if it's a peninsula, that's fine too. It basically casts radials around to make sure that, you know, within a certain distance there's land in all directions. And so basically as it was going through its 4x4, it found that this was the highest location, you know, with that it found the first highest location that also when it cast radials around had a significant portion of land, you know, in all directions. And because we don't want to discourage coastlines, these will be the coolest spawn points. In fact, it is cool because you can, if you spawn here, you know, you off in the way distance, you can see the plateaus, you can see water in 2 directions, and you know, there's rivers and things over here. So it works out. But I didn't want to strand the player, you know, in the middle of the ocean on one of these little islands or something, so it makes sure that there's a significant amount of continent. The idea being, you know, it's going to be kind of a survival game, but I don't want to plop the player into impossible situations. There's going to be, it's basically an RPG, not, you know, not Minecraft survival mode. So you should start with some starting equipment, and you can head off into the wilderness if you want to, but it should be obvious that, hey, if I follow this road, I'm going to hit a town before nightfall, you know, when the, you know, really bad things maybe start coming out or whatever. But so like, you know, if you're role playing, you know, you were plopped in the middle of this world, you spawned in, you know, what do? What's your choice for how you want to play the game? And so you start here, and you know, maybe you see this coastal town over here off in the distance, and you say, I'm going to check that out. Or you just want to go explore the mountains, or you see this river and you follow it down to the ocean, build a little hut down there. I don't know. that is up to the player. But anyway, I wanted to make sure not to start them out in an impossible location. I hope that made sense, that explanation. There was a version of the find spawn that was scripted, and you could see the radials that it cast around and stuff. It's kind of cool. Okay, so back to fake spawn. And so fake spawn here isn't going to really change much because it doesn't affect the coastline, so we won't worry about it. But what we will do, since we already know, probably if I looked at just the first 5 spawn points, and for my own sanity, I am going to separate this into settlement 1 and settlement 2. I'll show you how I do that. So we've created this settlement list and this port list. And what I'll do is I will set those into the script binding. And we'll see. So settlement list, port list. Set the settlement list. And port list. Port list. So what this will allow me to do is take this code here and make a settlements 2. Put that in here. Oops. I didn't actually copy it. So I can. This is gonna need. I've been just grabbing these imports without thinking about it, and so I set up my layers so that I can clear a particular layer at the beginning, so that if I exit early, it's not constantly putting. Basically, every time the script runs, it's not constantly putting new. The layers are these lines that draws. For debugging. So we got settlements 2. We should be able to see the port list because we set it in the bindings. I should be able to turn this off down here. Okay, so we'll let that rerun, and you'll see it'll get rid of all of our little ports that we started plotting. But this takes 6-7 seconds to run. And now if I go over here and make sure that the main thing calls settlements 2. Now we get them back, but now that was super fast. And so if I decide, hey, let's look at the best 100. Yeah, see, already it's finished. This will save me man years on my life. But so what happens next is I go through these one at a time. Use their score to decide if they really are a city or not. So, for example, and by the way, the parameter for world spawn, it is actually built into the config, so it is possible to change the world spawn. And if you start a world, don't enter it, there's a config file you can go and you can change the spawn point, I believe, and then it will even generate the spawn tower in that new location the first time you join the world. So it is possible, if you were writing a specific campaign and wanted a specific world seed and so on, to set that up. And eventually scripts and stuff can set that as part of the world setup. I don't know if any of you ever played Neverwinter Nights, but Neverwinter Nights had this really cool mode where you could join as a dungeon master. And so you'd have other people log into your server and they would play the game, and you would run around invisible like a dungeon master, and you could possess the NPCs and have them talk and stuff. So you could actually sort of run a D&D campaign that way. And I envision having those sorts of tools for Mythruna too, because on my Mythruna server I think it would be cool to run some custom campaigns with stories, and at that point you would want to have pre-scouted locations and things to know that they had all the stuff you wanted, perhaps generated your own dungeons and so on, which I think would be cool. All right, so I mean, we're coming up on the end here, but what's going to happen next is I'm going to go through these, and let's look at the first 400. But I'm going to go through these and randomly select one, and then I need to suppress all the other ones around that. So if this one, for whatever reason, decided, yes, I'm definitely generating some kind of city here, then I would lower the scores of everyone nearby. Let's bring this back to 10. So when these guys generate, this guy at the river mouth, when he and that guy at the river mouth generates, he's going to suppress the scores of all these guys, and then they'll be less likely to generate. And so what happens is this priority queue needs to be resorted all the time because we'd be changing the scores, and that starts to get a little tricky to do in the live stream. And I could also just remove a bunch of them from the queue. Thing is, so there's two ways to handle it, right? You generate a town here, and so within some radius you just remove all candidates. Let's do that, because I think in 2 or 3 minutes I could have that working, and ideally you would suppress the score so that maybe still a random town might hear. So here, let me talk about it. So let's say this is where the town wanted to generate, where I'm sitting right now. And if we just suppressed the scores, then there's still the chance that a town would generate here too. And then you could have like these twin cities kind of situation, which would be kind of neat. If we just forcefully remove everything within, a day and a half's travel, then we never end up with those situations. So I'd really like to make it score based. But for the sake of just, let's see where towns would form. I think I'm going to just fake it now, and we'll remove everything that's within a certain radius. So let's do that real quick. First we're going to define our random seed, I think is associated with work. Yep. Okay. And we want to go through everything while best ports, well, not best ports, is empty. So this will just render everybody again, right? Everybody goes. But what we really want to do then is say, first let's just say, what's the threshold? Well, the threshold is the score. So double dice equals rand next double. Okay, so if the dice roll is less than the score, less than or equal to the score, like higher score means more likely. So so just without doing anything else, the random number generator says these would be the towns, right? Those would be the port cities. Too many, way too many. And so what we do is we come back and we'd say, all right, it's unrealistic. Oh, that's a shame that it didn't put, well, that's okay. That's actually a better location. You get attached to ideas, and it's sad when the random thing doesn't generate what you want. So basically for each one, if we decided to do that, then we're going to go through, it's going to be slow. Let's say, can I just do, def neighbor, def near equals, def near in, yeah, best ports, no, it's got to be an iterator. Best ports, best ports, iterator, IT has next. This is slow because we're, if you know big O, this is an n squared problem. We're going to, for every thing we generate, we're going to go through and remove, go through every other thing left in best ports. but we're slowly removing all the items anyway. And so here we go. What's the distance threshold? Threshold squared. And what we want to say is anything within a day's travel, and a day's travel is 3 times 1024, which is what, 3072? Did I get that right? 3 times 1024. Yep, 3072. So 3072 times 37. Oops. Why are you doing the square, Paul, when you... Well, because that keeps me from having to calculate the square root every time I want to do one of these. So double dist equals IT cell loc. Except we want to not... Well, it doesn't matter. Okay. Distance squared with port.cell.loc. And so if this dist squared is less than threshold squared, then we remove it. Uh-oh. Syntax error. No such property cell. Oh, yes. Yeah, a nearby. Check. That's what I want. Check. Call it check. Check. Cache charge. Yeah, so we're doing this n squared algorithm every time we generate a town. We remove everybody. And normally you do spatial index of some kind. Wow, that's slow. So we would definitely want to do a... Oh, it finished. I thought it was still running, but it actually finished instantly. So these are like the initial towns that might join, the coastal towns. Each one of these big hexes here is a, that 3072 number, so that's a day's travel. So we never get 2 towns closer than a day apart. Probably that could be spread. So it's kind of cool. And so, yeah, so this is sort of an initial pass. It's not really going to be the way, but I just wanted to see kind of visually what it looks like. And so we have our big coastline over here. Yeah, so we get... Oh, that's neat. So this city would actually be out on this little island here, because this shallow water, the algorithm for the large water bodies ignores these shallow coastlines and makes them part of the land. And so this guy is kind of neat because he's nearby a port, because he's near deep water that could reach this stuff, but he's also in this shallows area. And so a river would dump in here, and but a kind of a city. I don't know. It's neat. Maybe not realistic, but if the code generates a city there and does all the bridges and connections and stuff to make it work, I think it would look really cool. And so you get attached to these ideas, and of course as soon as I change the random source, it'll move around and I'll be disappointed again. Just like with the rivers, I got disappointed when I changed the land algorithm. But so anyway, this is a first pass at where cities might appear, and again, these might need to be treated a little differently, but who knows? Maybe good mining means that there's going to be shipping traffic there. And here, yep, so I thought these were out in the water, but again, being ports, this is really shallow water here. So yeah, some cool stuff. Hey, look, there'd be like a city kind of on the hill here with some bridges off to the, in order to connect to the rest of the land, they'd have to build some bridges, probably right here. Big old bridge, maybe up here, because no mountain up there. Anyway, it's just cool stuff to think about and imagine what might be next. And I think that's where I'm going to stop it, guys, because we're 6 minutes over. Hopefully it was an entertaining... Yeah, so this body of water was large enough that this thing thought it should generate a town here, and that's not wrong because there's a river here. So, kind of neat. This is a good starting point for the next phase, which is to build roads and start building the more interior towns, and those would require higher thresholds because I want to leave plenty of wilderness. I think that's where it's going to be fun. Oh, but the idea being that, as a new player in the game, you could work your way up and own a plot of land in some existing town, or if you get enough resources and things, you could go out in the middle of nowhere and start your own town and hire NPCs to work there, or just make it an attractive place that NPCs would want to live. Connect with your own roads and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's the dream. No promises, but that's the dream. To have all this interconnected and the world knows what things are going on. That's stuff I've planned out. All right, any questions before I finish it? I'm going to start wrapping it up here. My voice is actually starting to go, so it's probably a good time. All right. Looks like we've got 5 concurrent viewers. Welcome to the live stream, and I'm so glad you could join us. And I want to thank everyone. Share with your friends. Comment on the videos. Like, comment, subscribe. Share with your friends if you think they might be interested in what's going on. You give them the download link if they want to try the game. Whatever. Every little bit helps. I think we've gotten quite a few. I say quite a few in quotes, but because 2 or 3 people that have joined in the last couple of weeks, and every little bit helps, and it's nice to see new faces. And thank you to my patrons again. And on that note, I will shut it down.